it poses the question around the talent ID. So Cormac Izuchuku is now an Ulster player and an Irish international, but someone somewhere along the line took a punt on him in Ulster to give him the opportunity to go up there. It's a little bit easier for him. He wasn't highly rated in Leinster, so he wasn't in the Leinster Sub Academy or Academy. But what I would love to see, and I've said this a few times, is that effectively, as these kids come out of school, it's an open market. It's an open market. So, for example, Connacht a couple of years ago, I've met Connacht development officers and Connacht academy managers at schools games, Leinster schools games, pretty much every school game, to be fair. They're up there watching. Now, in fairness, some of the kids are already part of their program, particularly the Ross Gray kids. But they're looking to see, what the next generation looks like and try and tap into those, try and get them to play for Connacht under 18s, etc. And in fairness, up to now, they're only really getting the fellas that maybe miss out on Leinster or Leinster schools, etc., or Leinster Sub Academy. But I would love to see a day, and I'm probably wrong on this, but in terms of a lot of people wouldn't agree with it, but is that if Munster see that they've got a hooker shortage in their depth chart, and I think you look at the age of the Munster senior hookers, there probably was 2 years ago when Gus was leaving school, or with Sam, it was obviously clear that Leinster had a big backlog of 10s ahead of them, including Charlie Tector. That Munster, Connacht, Ulster could go in there and make that player an offer that makes it very hard for them to refuse. I'd much prefer that model than the model where as soon as Leinster get 3 players deep in the same position, that we try and move them. I think if Gus McCarthy goes to Munster at 18, or Ronan Keller went to Munster at 18, or Sam Prendergast goes to Connacht at 18, they pretty much are kind of homegrown Connacht players then to a certain extent because they've come through their academy system. And I would love to see that. I think that would change the game. There's so many kids coming through Leinster that could be internationals if they got more opportunities elsewhere. That's how I would like to see it. So I don't think it's a free market per se. So everyone has a finite budget. You use the budget as you want. So Sualehi from Australia, he's not going to play next weekend because he's broken his hand. He was a superstar athlete in schools. Australia would love to keep him, but the NRL came in and got him. Now he's ended up being back in rugby union for the moment. But that's how I would like to see it. Is that it's a free market, and at the moment it's not really a free market.
Well, Birch, I suppose Leinster's retort to that would be, why the hell would we allow that to happen?
But they're not. Well, okay. Look, I think why the hell would that happen? No one's contracted at this stage, Gav. No one's contracted. What we got to change our mindset is that if you're absolutely big on talent ID and it's a professional sport, right? And this isn't unique to rugby. Look at all the other sports. Look at tennis. Look at basketball. So a good basketball schools player is coming out. Colleges all over America are trying to recruit that talent to come to their team to help them win things, and then eventually, the same thing happens for the draft system to go pro. But we know that the college system in America, it's amateur, but it's effectively pro. So athletes will go to the best program or the best financial situation for them and their family. So these kids aren't Leinster's property. They're just playing rugby in Leinster, in a Leinster school. So they're in Gonzaga, Newbridge, Michaels, Rock, effectively. So until they become contracted to Leinster, they're not Leinster's. Leinster don't have a divine right to them, and that's how I see it. That's how I see it. So, if Leinster really believe in them, they will then make an offer, and it's only going to be 3 or 4 kids. Not even. It's probably 1 kid a year, 2 kids a year, where another province really, really needs someone of that ability, and they make a play to get them. And then Leinster have a decision to make. If they can match that, well, then the kid has a decision to make. Does he want to stay in the Leinster system, which is obviously, they're from Leinster more often than not, and there's been a high number of players who've done really well through that. Sam and Gus are just another example of that. Tom Clarkson, etc. So the Leinster model of developing players is very strong. It's very, very strong, and I can see why players would stay there. But at the moment, I think the other provinces, because of the numbers disadvantage that they have, are only really getting to make offers for players at 20. And then you're only kind of normally getting the fellas that Leinster don't see a massive opportunity for or need for. Whereas I think if you get them a little bit earlier, you can actually change the whole narrative of a province. And look, let's be honest. Like, the reason the other three provinces aren't where they need to be is a lack of talent. You can say it was Graham Roundtree's fault or it was Dan McFarland's fault or whatever, but there's still a talent deficit in those provinces. And the only way you can change that short term is probably by recruiting from another province, because obviously it's hard to get foreign players, or you find someone special coming out of school who within 2 years can be a starter for your province. And okay, Sam is 3 years out, but effectively he could have been starting for another province last year. I would have thought.
The major impediment, the main, I mean, it sounds great, but like, is the players' will. And we've already seen that in loads of examples. And even if you put a financial incentive to it, I still think that that desire for those young players to play for Leinster would still win out in most cases. Like, they've played, most of them have played for underage teams, and they already have a bond, and they grow up supporting Leinster, and they also see it as their best route to be the best player they can be. And like, look at McCarthy as the example that we started with. He's 21, he's in the academy, he's just started a game for Ireland, and yeah, there was there was obviously injury fortune there, but he also, like, in fairness, the first two games of the season, McKee and Barron were available, but he started both of them for Leinster. So they, even though he's young, because he's talented, they could see this guy's kind of accelerating now, and they gave him opportunities. And had Leinster not made those decisions before McKee and Barron were injured, then he probably wouldn't have started for Ireland. So he'll be able to say, even though I'm young and even though there's loads of hookers ahead, I still got the opportunities to show. And he also probably feel that he's in the best place to improve as a player, because there's all that quality around him, all that talent around him. So it's kind of like a vicious circle, isn't it? The incentive to go elsewhere just isn't there. We've seen it so many times with loads of senior players as well. Those senior hookers in Leinster, at least three of them have had chances to move elsewhere at different stages. They decided to stay, and I'd say they all feel they made the right decision. There's loads of other players in Leinster squad. Loads is an exaggeration, but at least 4 or 5 others who could have gone to different provinces have stayed. And as far as I'm aware, are all happy with their decision. So it really is a tricky one, because the RFU have been very consistent with saying we cannot force anyone, or we can't make people go against their will. And at the moment, and it doesn't seem like it's going to change at all the players will, including 17, 18-year-olds who've had a taste of it in a Leinster schools team or a Leinster clubs team. They just want to play for Leinster, because as we're seeing time and time again, if you stay in Leinster, even if you're not first choice, you can still play for Ireland, and you can still have a really good contract, and you can have good financial compensation in that regard. So there's just no incentive really at all for players to not chase their kind of dream with Leinster.
100%. Sorry, I'm talking about choice. I'm not talking about forcing anyone to go anywhere. I'm talking about, hypothetically, Gus McCarthy wins a Schools Cup with Blackrock, and Peter Wilkins or Graham Roundtree or Ian Costello goes up to see him in Dublin, sits down with his parents, says, look, you can go to college in UCC, you can go to college in UL Bowes. Here's a 3-year contract on 50, 60, 70,000 a year. Then they have a choice to make. Murray, I'm at the moment, there's no choice to make, because effectively that's not happening. You know what I mean? And also the hookers or the Leinster players who've been asked to move. They don't want the provinces outbidding each other, right? So effectively, if you're on 150,000 a year, and the option is to move somewhere else on 150,000 a year, it's hard to make that choice at the moment, because you're basically in a team that potentially can win European Cups. You're playing with all the other internationals. You don't really have to start every week just to get picked for Ireland. So I'm not. So, but I can see why no one is leaving. I'm not saying force anybody to leave, but if let's use Munster. If Munster feel that Gus McCarthy, Dan Sheehan, Ronan Kelleher would help them get better, and they have a fixed budget, right? And they decide to spend less on a winger, right? To spend less on a winger, have one player less, to make an offer to one of those hookers that makes it interesting. Again, at the end of the day, it's the player's choice. If the player decides to turn down 100 grand a year more to stay, well, that's brilliant for Leinster. And I think Leinster have done a lot that players are very happy there, and their environment is really good. And this shouldn't be this sounds anti-Leinster. It's certainly not for me. I'm just talking about how do you actually spread players around a bit more. And my thing is not get them when they've proven. So Gus McCarthy now, Leinster have developed him, fast tracked him. It's too late now to be trying to to say, oh, you should be gone somewhere else. But could another province not have seen and sat down with him 2 years ago and said, look, you've got Ronan Kelleher ahead of you, got Dan Sheehan ahead of you, you got John McKee ahead of you, got Lee Barron ahead of you. We believe for the next 3 or 4 years, your future is in Munster, Connacht, or Ulster, because it's on what his journey has gone incredibly well. But I don't think he could have. I don't even think Leinster could have said to him, in 2 years' time, you're going to be starting against Fiji. You know what I mean? So it's all, and that's great, and that can happen. But I'm talking about actually a proper open market for the best talent in the country. And I'm not saying anyone should be forced to leave or being loaned out to other provinces. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying if Connacht want Kieran Frawley as their 10, right? They can go and make him an offer that Leinster have to compete with, that Leinster give their best offer, and then he has a choice to make. It's not really how it works at the moment. So if you can't outbid another province, well, then the environment, which is the best environment, which is Leinster, is always going to stay incredibly strong.